Hey guys, thanks so much for joining today. I'm really glad you're here because today I want to chat about the 3 foundational elements I practice in my charcoal drawings that actually make me a better oil painter. So when I first decided to learn oil painting, I really didn't know where to begin. So I just picked up some brushes and started painting. The idea was once I see what I can do, then I'll know what I need to work on. And what I quickly figured out was that it had been so long since I had composed any artwork, I was really rusty. And no amount of brushwork and paint handling techniques is going to help make up for a lack of foundational skills. And that's when I put down the paint and I picked up the charcoal. There's a reason why so many pre-painting studies are made in charcoal. It mimics the process of oil painting in that it allows you to work dark to light, so you can pick out the highlights with an eraser. It can simulate brushwork in that you can use big broad strokes like the side of your charcoal, as well as get fine point details by really sharpening that point. And the best of all, it allows you to work out the challenges of interpreting your subject without the distractions of color. So with charcoal as my medium, I set out on a really purposeful practice in a specific order that started with overall composition. So if you've created any artwork at all, you know that whether you work from imagination or reference, from life or from photos, there are a million decisions to be made in creating your artwork. Before putting any marks on paper, you really want to make these decisions with purpose. So I'm talking about decisions like how much of the subject are you going to include in your picture? What are the elements going to be? How are they going to be placed on the canvas? How are they going to interact with the shape and size of the canvas, not just each other? And how are all of those choices going to influence the final piece? If I have a subject that is leaning to the left, then maybe I want to place them slightly to the right of the canvas to give the overall picture a sense of balance. Or maybe if I have a subject matter that conveys falling, maybe I'm using a really, really long canvas and I'm placing my subject really small all the way at the bottom to just give that overall feeling of gravity. So when you see me start a charcoal drawing, you'll see me put down a bunch of vertical and diagonal lines, and this really represents the motion or gesture of the subject that I'm trying to convey. And then you'll see me add maybe a few boxes and triangles, which roughly represents my subject and kind of gives them the bounds that they're going to inhabit. And so together, all of that in a very short time gives me a sense of whether or not I'm going to get the outcome that I'm looking to achieve. So if you're looking at your artwork and it's just kind of floating there on the page, or all the elements just aren't relating to each other the way that you'd like them to, you probably want to spend some time researching and studying the principles of composition. It's probably the most fundamental skill that you can develop as an artist, but it's the most critical. And it's probably where I spend the vast majority of my time and study. Next, I'll set out to tackle interpretation of light and shadow. So I like to think of this step separate from the composition, but it really is more an extension of that step and kind of a prep or a bridge to the next step, because in this step we're going to give weight to the skeleton of the composition that we just created, as well as creating a soft map for where the details are eventually going to fall. Sometimes when you're working with photos, it can be really difficult to see the light and shadow. It's just something that cameras do. They kind of diffuse light, especially if people are taking photos with their phones. The cameras on phones have gotten really great, but they still kind of do this thing where they evenly light everything. And so if you're looking for things like direct light versus reflected light, it can be really hard to distinguish. So if you've ever heard an artist say that you should work from life, this is probably why. because now you're in a position of having to interpret that form without that information. And it's just a lot easier to do if you've seen that item or that subject in real life. For me, determining the direction of light is a decision that I just have to make. Even if I can't see it in the reference that I'm using, I have to make that determination, because what that allows me to do is then make broad generalizations about where the shadows should be. And if I can block those in before I do anything else, it seems to put me on the right track and creates a sense of uniformity or wholeness to my piece. So if you're feeling like your drawings are flat, or you find yourself using all the darks and all the lights evenly all over the subject, light and shadow or tonal exercises, that would be a great thing to spend some time on. Okay, once those two are in check, I'm now moving on in my drawing to the final piece, which is really about defining the focus. So this could be a twinkle in the eye or some scruff on the neck, but this is where the original inspiration comes to the surface. It's time to find what drew you to the subject in the first place and make sure that that is what is shining through, so that others can take a look at your artwork and share in that feeling that you had when you originally were inspired. This is where we take the most liberty in breaking away from the reference, I would say, and allowing our skills to freely create the elements that are really necessary. And we do this by making decisions around what gets taken to a quote-unquote finished level of detail and what will just take a secondary role in the overall picture. For most of my portraits, I'm looking at a face. So specifically you'd say, okay, so it's the eyes, that's where the focus is going to be, or maybe in the nose, but that's not always the case. So depending on the subject and the lighting and the composition, it could be the folds of an ear or even a special article of clothing. It really doesn't matter what it is, but that you've made that conscious choice around that feature and are constructing all the other elements to serve that decision. So if you find yourself working every part of your image to the same level of specificity, try taking a step back and looking at your inspiration, and then look again at your work. Try noting things like, where does your eye go? Where are you immediately drawn to in your image? Is that where the inspiration lives? Or are there lots of distractions? Studying and practicing concepts of contrast, emphasis, movement, these things are going to help you gain back control of your viewer's eye and create the art that you love. So that's why I do so many charcoal studies, and I probably will continue to do them for as long as I can. Like all skills, my art practice is going to require maintenance, and that's probably one of the reasons I love it so much. There's really no end to it. I could literally do this the rest of my life and never stop learning new things. What about you? What are you practicing? Where are you focusing your efforts this year? I'd love to hear more about it, along with anything else you'd like to see more of on my channel. Just leave a comment below. Guys, thanks again for joining today. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more. And yeah, I'll see you soon.